Welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Dylan. If you are interested in learning how to advance your reptile care or progress your reptile care, then make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any new videos or podcasts. So a few weeks ago, I put out my reptile room tour, and in that video, if you watched it, you know that I asked you guys to help me on a future video by sending me in pictures or videos of the enclosures that you have at home. So I know you guys enjoy seeing my enclosures as well as the other enclosures that are here on YouTube, but I also know for a fact that many of you have excellent enclosures at home that you don't show off because you either don't have an Instagram or YouTube account or you don't want to publish anything, which is totally fair enough. So I thought I would take a bunch of your pictures that you sent me, make a compilation video, and we can go through to see what everybody is up to and hopefully learn from each other as well. That's probably the best part about this, is we can see what other people are doing, how they're caring, and see if there's anything you can pick out that you can apply to your own husbandry. The other awesome thing about this is many of the viewers that sent me pictures are all consumers of not only content on my channel and the podcast, but as well as the other YouTube channels that are similar to mine. And you can see that they're applying that progression and advancement of their care in their husbandry, which is just so cool. And there's even a few people who are brand new to keeping, but happen to stumble upon the podcast and the YouTube channel and have used the things that they've learned from my channel and the others to just start their reptile journey off on the right foot, which is just totally incredible. So we're going to take a look at those as well. Now, I didn't use names, so if you wanted me to use your name, I apologize. I thought I would err on the side of not using people's names unless this person specifically told me that there was an Instagram or a YouTube account attached to it. So I didn't use most names. And then the last thing is, if you wanted to participate in this video but you didn't get a chance to send me your pictures or videos yet, no problem. I'm sure I will do another one of these. So if you do want to participate and you're watching this now, send me an email at hello@animalsathome.ca, or on Facebook, you can find me there, Animals at Home, or on Instagram, any way you want. Send me a DM with a message with the pictures or videos, however you want to do it. You can give me just a short description of the enclosure and maybe the animal that you keep in there, and then I'll include it in the next one. Okay, let's jump into the first set of photos. All right, so here we have a dart frog enclosure, and now Facebook unfortunately compresses everything when you send it, so it does get a little bit grainy, but hopefully this will still give us a good idea of what's happening here. So lots of live plants, lots of driftwood, which is awesome, and a little bit of fresh water at the bottom, which is really cool. And he also sent me a few photos of the actual frogs inside, so I think these are Dendrobates auratus. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not super familiar with the dart frogs. So there they are there. A couple more photos. Here's a nice photo of the moss growing, which is great. I think that's Java moss. Again, if I'm wrong, that's okay. Lots of nice live plants in the back, a few hiding spots, and here you can see that fresh water poking up, which is really cool. And here's a great photo of that species of frog right there. Dart frogs are definitely on my list eventually of something that I would love to keep. I think just being able to set up such a cool paludarium is something that is a really cool accent to a room, so I definitely want to do that, and they're such cool little creatures. So on to the next set of photos. Now this is a great photo because this is a picture that this keeper sent me of what his enclosures looked like a few years back before he started really advancing himself in the care department. So this top enclosure I believe is the leopard gecko and the bottom is a starred agama. And this is so typical of what you would see even now. This is what, if you followed a pet store care sheet, for example, this is very much what you might get. You know, no substrate in the bottom enclosure, things along those lines. So this is a great starting point, and now we can see how far he has come. All right, so here is the leopard gecko enclosure from the picture before, and look at how much better this is. Way more naturalistic. We've got some live plants in here, obviously loose substrate, which is going to definitely help with regulating humidity. All these cork grounds and cork bark for the gecko to climb up. I guarantee you on the left side here, this gecko climbs all the way to the top because they do climb, and especially if you give them something like this where it's easy for them to climb. And I think maybe that looks like an Arcadia shade dweller up there. I'm not quite sure what's being used for heat, but awesome enclosure. And here is the agama enclosure, which was at the bottom of that stack in that very first picture. So this is, again, much better. Look at all these live plants, some grasses growing up here, a halogen bulb. I think there was a halogen in the last one, but this one definitely looks more of a flood, which is great. You can see the agama here is enjoying that. There's a rock in the back, which would be absorbing some of that infrared heat, which is great as well. I also like this style of having a cork ground half buried in. That's a great way to make a hide and also help regulate humidity as well. It can stay nice, moist, and cool in there, and I'm sure the lizard uses that all the time, and a great climbing structure in the middle as well. So again, this is very, very much improved from the very first photo and looks great. And this is the same keeper again with a gargoyle gecko. Again, awesome. Lots of cork tubes and cork rounds for this gecko to climb in, some live plants, a couple of bromeliads in here, and some leaf litter. I'm not very good with plant species, although I have quite a few of these plants at home. I just don't remember what they're called. And I also really like this background, the cork background. So I'm not sure if this was more of a DIY or if you bought this background, but even if you buy cork sheets, I think that just looks so much better than those styrofoam things that you might get from Exoterra and whatnot. It's just way more natural and it's way more durable. The styrofoam ones eventually do break down. I have a styrofoam one in my crested gecko enclosure and it basically just looks like a chunk of styrofoam at this point because all the paint has come off because it's been in there for 10 years. So I much prefer this cork style background. Now this enclosure here is actually for a tarantula. I think it's P. metallica. I'm not going to pronounce the genus because I'll definitely mess that up. But again, this just shows you how the quality of care you can provide for a tarantula. This is not just a very plain enclosure. We have some live plants, leaf litter. This animal's going to be able to dig down into the soil and also climb through the tubes and put webbing in there. I don't know a ton about tarantulas. I assume there'll be some webs inside those tubes, but again, that's a really great enclosure. And then there's that cork background again, which I do really like. And the last photo for this keeper, if I'm not mistaken, I believe this was an enclosure that is designed for a scorpion or a species of scorpion. I'm not super familiar with all arthropods and whatnot, but I believe it's for a scorpion. And again, this is fantastic. You have some live plants, some great substrate and whatnot, and some cork rounds. So very, very cool. All right, so on to the next keeper. So this is a ball python enclosure that's 4 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. It has 6 hides in it, an Arcadia 6% UVB bulb, an Arcadia solar glow bulb, as well as a ceramic heat emitter. And there's so many things I like about this enclosure. The first thing is this is a keeper who's only been keeping reptiles this calendar year. I think this animal, they've only had this animal for a few months, which is just so cool to see that this is how they originally set up their ball python. You're not going to find that a lot. Everybody typically starts with a very simple way and then they build into it, but this individual happened to find our content as well as the other channels and just hit the ground running with this. And I know they have a very good pet store in their area as well, which obviously helped them out. So this is really cool. First things that jump out right away, again, is the heat shining onto this big mass of rock. So they have the halogen bulbs and the ceramic heat emitter heating up this rock, and he actually said there's actually a bit of a cave underneath. So I guarantee that rock holds that heat up until late in the night, which is really, really great. That's one way you can actually replicate the earth throwing off heat during the evening after a long, hot day. And again, 6 hides. So there's 6 hides in here somewhere. There's obviously the cork rounds down here. There's the rock cave, and I'm sure there's a few back there as well. So this is a great ball python enclosure. And this enclosure is for Phelsuma grandis. So this is a giant day gecko, and I'm not seeing the gecko in there. I'm sure it's hiding somewhere, but classic bamboo. Day geckos really do love bamboo. So if you keep, I used to have bamboo in mine. I took it out because when I changed it, I didn't add it back in. But I know when I did have bamboo, she really did love hiding in there. Have some great live plants in here, the bromeliad down here as well. And again, there's a good use of that cork background, which is just great for adding extra dimension to the back. And I believe there is an LED, I think that's a Jungle Dawn at the top there, as well as the Shade Dweller UVB bulb, both from Arcadia. And here is their son's crested gecko enclosure. And this is what I love. I love that the whole family has a different enclosure that they look after, and they're getting the kids involved in proper care, which is just, I mean, that is amazing. Imagine being, a younger kid that's, 11 or 12 years old, and you're learning how to care for animals properly, how UV works and how infrared works, and how to add live plants and take care of things in the proper way. That is just so valuable, and this is exactly what I'm seeing here. So this is a great crested gecko setup. I believe that is a Arcadia Shade Dweller as well. Have a nice little ledge here for food. Again, some great bamboo and a few live plants and a few fake plants as well, which obviously helps with some more hiding spots. Crested geckos really do love to sleep hanging up on the glass, so having some fake plants does help for that. And the other thing I was going to say about this cage that I forgot was this is the smaller Exoterra, but the individual that sent this to me said they have a custom one on the way that's much larger. So again, that's going to be fantastic. I hope to be able to see that photo as well when they do get the new setup. And this is actually their daughter's corn snake enclosure, which is so awesome to see. Again, getting the kids involved, learning how to do proper care, which is great. There's a Arcadia Shade Dweller at the top. Looks like they're using a ceramic heat emitter for heating. There's some fake plants there to act as if some hides. And I like this cork round or cork bark branch that's coming up through the middle of the enclosure. As you know, corn snakes love to climb, so that's great. I actually like this black wood enclosure too. That looks pretty cool. So awesome job. This is someone who's just getting into the reptile hobby as well. So imagine how far this person is going to come. She's just starting with her corn snake now, and this is how she's starting. Fantastic. And this is their enclosure for their Pueblan milk snake. So a couple things jump out right away that are great. All these climbing branches, as well as look at the floor. The floor is covered with just different areas that the snake can hide in. The old school method of warm hide, cool hide, that is time to throw that out. That is just so old school. An enclosure like this really allows the snake many different spots it can hide. And people say, well, then if I put this many hides in, I'm never going to see my snake. But there are studies that show actually the complete opposite. The more decor, hiding opportunities, and climbing opportunities that you give your animals, the more you'll actually end up seeing them because they're more confident in their enclosure. If they think they got to scoot all the way across the enclosure to get to another hide, they're more likely to stay in their hide. But if they are familiar with the environment and they know that there's many different places they can hide as they move from one end to the other, they're more comfortable coming out and they're more likely to risk exposing themselves because they know that the slither to the next hide is not going to be far away. And this is a perfect example of that. Again, we have another shade dweller up here, which is great, and a ceramic heat emitter as well. Again, I always encourage people to try to use halogen whenever possible because then they do introduce the infrared A wavelength as well. But the ceramic heat emitter does work well for nighttime heat because obviously it doesn't emit light. And finally, their leopard gecko enclosure. Again, leopard gecko being the very first reptile they got back in March of this year, which is just not that long ago. And this is great. Loose substrate obviously allows the animal a place to dig. There's some plants. I'm not sure. I think those are probably fake plants. There's a place for the animals to climb and hide and get around. And there's UV right here. So this is the Arcadia shade dweller, so it allows the animal to bask under the ultraviolet light, which is great. And again, if this is your first time keeping a leopard gecko and this is how you start, that is amazing. This looks great. So this family is off to a great start as far as reptile care goes. And this is just the beginning. Like I said, they're just at the very beginning of the reptile journey. So this is great. Let's jump on to the next one. Okay, there's some seriously cool things about this enclosure. Like right off the top, this looks like a zoo level exhibit when you look at this rock work, and we're going to get into that in a second. But this is actually a 120-gallon fish tank that has a custom top put on top of it, which is really cool. Like I love the way that looks because you have this whole viewing panel down here, and it's not interrupted by sliding glass or anything. You can see the animals down here. Now, I believe this is for Ackie monitors, which is a really cool Ackie monitor enclosure, and the dimensions are 4 feet long and then 2 feet wide, and I believe 60 inches tall, so about 5 feet tall. And look how deep that substrate layer is. That is really, really cool. So we have a halogen bulb right here that happens to be on a rod that apparently can be adjusted down lower or higher just based off what temperature you want on that basking spot. Again, using a large rock mass to collect the infrared is great. And there's another infrared or another halogen bulb at the top as well. So here is another shot of it as well. At the top, you can see that Arcadia, I believe it's an Arcadia 14% UVB bulb, and all this amazing rock work, which we're going to talk about in a second. And the substrate down below is topsoil, sand, mixed with a little bit of clay as well, and some leaf litter. But this just looks like a zoo exhibit, like legitimately. So let's take another picture here from the... So here's the picture from straight on, and this is where you can really get a sense of that rock work. It just looks incredible, and this rock work is totally DIY. The keeper himself did this. He just carved out a styrofoam, and obviously went through a bunch of different processes with it. I kind of asked him about it a little bit, and he said didn't want to tell us too much because he's actually considering maybe starting a business related to making these backgrounds or producing kits that allow people to do it. I don't want to say too much because I'm not sure if he's going to do it, but if he does, I will ask that he lets me know, and I can let you guys know, because I think if we all could have enclosures like this, we all would definitely do that. Now, I think there's even places where the Ackie monitors can get underneath and not behind the background, but underneath it to allow them to have a little bit of shade and shelter and a cave. And all of it is textured so they can easily climb straight up to the top and down. And I mean, that looks incredibly natural. There's a few more pictures here we can flip through. There's one kind of from the top. And another one from the front there. Very, very cool looking enclosure. 2 different hotspots, UV at the top, awesome job. Now, I really love this enclosure. Now, I know this individual is a listener of the podcast, as well as the other channels that are similar to mine, the terrarium channels, Lori Torini's channel. Of course, all that will be in the description below. And this is her first snake. This is an enclosure for Brazilian rainbow boa. And this is how she sets up her very first time owning a snake. Like, how jaw-dropping is this? And I love that the content that we're producing here, as well as the other channels, are allowing people to step into the reptile hobby with this. Like, I'm embarrassed to show you guys my very first snake enclosures. It was basically just a tub, like just bad. I don't even want to talk about it. And then I have someone sending me this as their first setup. This is incredible. Now this enclosure is 100 centimeters by 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters. And right now it's housing a baby Brazilian rainbow boa. There is a shade dweller on the top, as well as a ceramic heat emitter, and a 50-watt halogen bulb, which is great. So you have that daytime heat that's going to give you the infrared or near infrared wavelengths. And then also I know that her room temperature at night is very cold, so she needed to bolster that a little bit with the ceramic heat emitter, which is perfect. And there's also an LED light in the back as well. Look at all these live plants. And one thing I really like that I've seen a few people do, I'm not sure if she got this from Stefan from the Terrarium channel or not, but the way she's done the background where she's not completely covered it, it's just about half covered, and it just looks super clean. I think the next time I do something like this, I want to copy it so you have some of it is glass and some of it is, fully filled in with probably some sort of foam as well as a silicone and substrate to cover it. But it just looks so cool where it's just half there and it's just a clean line. And I wonder if on the other side she's painted it black. I'm not sure, but it does look very cool. And I believe we have a picture of the little snake. So here is the rainbow boa at night. Look, you can see there's lots of humidity in here. I'm sure she's just recently misted it. And guess what? He's climbing and exploring his new environment. I know she was really worried adding this tiny little snake into a large enclosure, but I believe he's doing just fine and he'll grow up in there. And I'm sure she has plans for a larger enclosure in the future. Okay, so here is another keeper who is brand new to reptile keeping. And for this individual, reptile keeping only became legal, I think, within the last 2 or 3 years. So it's a brand new hobby in their country. And this is actually the very first setup he did. He has a new setup now, but I just wanted to show you guys the progression. Although I will say, again, if this is the first time you've set up a snake enclosure, a reptile enclosure, and this is what you look like, great job. You have a nice background, some climbing branches, there's some good lighting here, and it's not a tub, which is great. I mean, typically people start with a tub setup because it's easy. This is pretty impressive. So let's see where he is now. So here's a stack of PVC enclosures that he's recently purchased. These are 5.2 feet long, 2.6 feet deep, and 2 feet high. So here are the enclosures set up. They're both for boas. He has a true red-tailed Guyana boa constrictor as well as a boa imperator, and it is the IMG gene, which is a really cool gene. I'll show you guys in a second. You know I'm not a morph guy, but I do really love the way this snake looks. So these enclosures look great. Again, this is someone who's just getting into reptile care. He has some LED lights up here. I know UV is on the way, he says. And one thing I would say to this, boas love to climb. So if you can use that vertical space, add some climbing branches in there, they will definitely use it. Great big water dish, and I love all that cork hide and rounds to act as hides for the snakes. But yeah, I would just say add some more climbing opportunities because boas really do love to climb. And here are the Micro Element Evo thermostats, which I really wish we had here in Canada because they are nice looking thermostats and they look like the functionality of them is quite high. So I do wish that, or I hope maybe one day we'll get them here. And I think they look pretty cool as well. So here is a shot of that red-tailed boa. These are amazing looking snakes. I believe I have another picture as well. Again, Facebook does kind of grain them out a little bit. So this is a true red tail. You know, people say red tail boas when you're talking about a Colombian boa. Those are not true red tails. Look how deep and red this tail is, and they also have this peaking in the saddles here. That's how you know it is a true red tail boa constrictor, and that is exactly what they look like. An amazing looking animal. Definitely something that I would want to have as well. And here is that IMG boa. So IMG stands for increasing melanin gene. So this happens to be a morph. Now, I don't know if these happen in the wild at all, but this is sort of like your panther when you're talking about leopards or jaguars. This is that gene that just creates a completely black snake. And when they're born, they actually look like a normal snake. And then over time, they slowly change. Through every shed, they're going to get darker and darker and darker. And then maybe after 2 or 3 years, I'm not sure, they eventually are just jet black boas. And I do really like the way they look. Again, not a morph guy, but IMG is something that I always have found super fascinating. The same way I find a panther fascinating. I don't know what it is. It's just very, very cool looking snake. And he actually sent me a video of the IMG as well. Really cool looking snake. You can see the pattern is starting to fade, although it still has some iridescence there from coming off the lights, but really, really cool looking animal. All right, so on to the next one. And this is a really neat enclosure for a boa constrictor amarelli, or which is also known as the short-tailed boa. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the actual Latin name correctly, but this is what he looks like. He's just down here in his tube here. It might be a female, actually. And this is a cool enclosure because it kind of reminds me of the enclosures that I currently have for my boas, where you have, I'm not sure how long this is, maybe 3 or 4 feet, maybe 3 feet, and then it has a little door and an entrance into another enclosure. So before we do that, we'll just take a look here. Nice cork rounds and cork hides for the animal to hide in. Great slab here underneath this. I think this is the Arcadia deep heat projector, which is going to allow this rock to absorb heat throughout the day and night, which is great. And here is the other side of the enclosure. It doesn't look like there's any light in here, which I think is not bad at all. That's the way I have mine set up as well. So that allows the animals to find a place in the enclosure that's completely dark retreat, which is great. There is this structure in the middle that's going to act as a hide as well. And again, they have a ceramic heat emitter here pointing down to a giant slab of rock, which is a great way to store heat and store energy throughout the day and night. Now, one thing I want you to pay attention to, I'm not sure if you can see one in the other picture, no, is this little device right here. This little gray box. Now this is what's called a sensor push sensor. If you just Google sensor push, I'll put that in the comments as well, or the description. And that's actually a temperature and humidity probe that automatically attaches to your phone. So you can connect to your enclosures whenever you want. And I know this particular keeper has those, I think, in all his enclosures, and then he can access the parameters of his enclosures at any point in time throughout the day, as long as he has access to internet. So I think that's pretty cool, and it's actually much more accurate than the typical ones that we use, because the digital ones that we use are kind of hit or miss, especially on humidity when it comes to accuracy. So that is something that you might want to incorporate into your enclosure. And here's just a really cool shot of that boa perched up on the top of that cork round. These are really cool boa constrictors as well. They are short-tailed boa, so they're kind of a different locality and a really neat looking animal. And here is an enclosure for his Brazilian rainbow boa. Now in the UK, you see a lot of those pressed board wooden enclosures. Now with a Brazilian rainbow boa, it's not going to be possible because it's probably going to rot and start to sort of melt away because of the humidity. You can see how much humidity is in this enclosure with the condensation at the bottom there, which is totally normal for Brazilian rainbow boa. You want that humidity to be 70 plus at least. And this is a great enclosure. Again, there's that sensor push data collector, which is probably connected to his phone, or definitely connected to his phone, which can give him updates on the humidity and the heat, which is definitely important for Brazilian rainbow boa. And then lots of different climbing branches and hiding spots, which is great. And I think this is a compact fluorescent UV, which again is the compact fluorescents aren't the best, but it is going to provide a little bit of UV, and a Brazilian rainbow boa doesn't need a ton because they are crepuscular and they do spend a lot of times on the rainforest floor. So this still allows the animal to absorb a little bit of UV without having an overpowering light source. And here's a photo of the Brazilian rainbow boa right there next to that sensor push data collector. And there's another photo of the rainbow boa hanging out in its water dish, which is totally common. Mine is in her water dish as we speak. And this keeper also sent me a few other photos of his carpet pythons, which I thought, since we're all reptile people here, we'd want to see them anyway. This is, I think, a Darwin carpet python. Obviously, it's an albino, which it raises some interesting points. I know I've talked to this keeper specifically about UV light for this animal, and it is very sensitive to UV light or bright light because albinos typically don't have great eyes, and they can be very, very sensitive to light. So that's one of the reasons that we want to be careful producing these morphs. This animal specifically needs a slightly different setup because it is very uncomfortable in bright light. And I believe this keeper has even said he's tried to put bright lights and the snake will hide because it just is totally uncomfortable, which makes sense. Even people who have albinism are very, very sensitive to bright light. And there's one more carpet python here as well. I think this must be some kind of morph. Maybe that's the zebra morph or something, but again, a pretty cool looking snake. So here we have a great crested gecko setup. This is actually a 90 by 90 by 45 centimeter enclosure that's split into two to accompany two different crested geckos, which is great. So really cool background here. Obviously, this is the sort of the foam and coconut husk background. There's a few hides in the back, which is great. That's something I would love to incorporate into my crested gecko enclosure, is having hides that are off the ground. Right now I have lots of foliage and he kind of sticks to the glass like I was saying earlier, but I think it would be better if they could have a place where they could go and almost like a tube to go into, and this one back here is pretty neat. If that is a hide, at least that's what I think it is. Lots of cool vines. Crested geckos love to climb, and they're very, very good jumpers. They could jump straight across this enclosure. So if you think like, oh, that vine might be too high for him to climb up to, they can jump almost to anything. It's pretty impressive. Lots of nice live plants in here as well, and I believe there's a full cleanup crew through the bottom. So there is an Arcadia Jungle Dawn LED bar at the top there, and the substrate itself is just a mix of sort of a DIY mix that you would do for a vivarium. So that's just a mixture of coconut husk, soil, orchid bark, charcoal, sphagnum moss, things along those lines. and this looks great. And here's a photo of one of her baby crested geckos that I'm sure everybody wants to see. Okay, another great progression photo here. So this is an individual that set up her bearded dragon enclosure, and I'm not sure if she found the podcast and started learning more, or just found the channel or other people's channels like mine, but however it was, this was her initial setup. Again, this is pretty classic for her original setup for a normal, out of the gates setup for a bearded dragon. Although I will say there's even loose substrate in here, which is unusual for someone who's new to keeping them. Typically, like it's a tile substrate or one of those weird mat things. So at least there's loose substrate there. I also like that they have rocks absorbing the infrared. But again, I'm not sure why I'm wasting any time on this enclosure, because this is the new enclosure. This is an excellent enclosure. I really love it. A couple things jump out right away. So first, you have the LED bar in the back, as well as the 14% UVB tube from Arcadia. I love the live plants. Hopefully they survive. I'm not sure. I know the bearded dragon hasn't been actually added into this enclosure yet, so we'll see how those succulents do in this plant. They may get torn up a little bit. Totally fine. And there's some climbing opportunities here. And again, I really like this slab of rock here. Looks like maybe a potential hide underneath that, but also this rock is going to be absorbing the infrared. She doesn't have the halogen set up here. Again, it looks like the animal is still in the other enclosure, but I'm sure the halogens will make their way on top of this slab of rock, which is going to be a great way for the animal to absorb heat throughout the night as well. All right, and this is Nathan's enclosure from Nathan Exotics. You can find him on YouTube. I'll post that in the links as well. And this is the enclosure for his bearded dragon. So nice halogen bulb here, nice bit of wood for him to relax on. And there is the UVB tube as well. And there's some live plants here. I'm not sure what species of plants they are, but that is pretty cool. There's another shot here that shows that better. There's the live plants. There's the bearded dragon relaxing on top of that hide there. Nice loose substrate for the dragon to dig through, and climbing branches, which is great. Now, the one thing I would say, and I know I've talked to Nathan about this before in the comment section once, is he was thinking, I want to add some, more climbing opportunities for this guy. And I would say I totally agree with that. If you can somehow, fix some branches in there that run across, or add some more climbing branches, you'll find that bearded dragon wants to climb more. So I think that'd be one way to add more depth and more enrichment for your bearded dragon by adding some, spots for him to climb. All right, we're on to our final 3 submissions here. I'm really enjoying this. I hope you guys are enjoying this as well. There's just so many different ideas, and I love showing off these incredible enclosures that you guys have. If you do enjoy this, make sure you subscribe and hit like on the video, and let me know in the comments which one was your favorite. And again, if you do want to participate in this in the future, just send me a message with your pictures of your enclosures so I can include it. So this is an excellent enclosure for Eurodactylode villardi, which is an animal that I actually didn't really know much about before this individual sent me this photo. Is one of those strange species of reptiles that just aren't very common in the reptile hobby yet. Maybe they will be in the future, but they're a very, very neat looking animal. This enclosure is incredibly well planted, and I like that background there, which is just that sort of husk background that you stick on. That adds a lot of moisture to the enclosure, which is great. You can spray that down and it holds humidity well. There's a shelf up here for food, and just very, very well planted. I like the substrate. It looks nice and natural with some leaf litter down there and whatnot. So great job on that one. I'm not quite sure what the lighting is, but it looks like there's probably at least an LED up there and maybe a UV as well. And here is a crested gecko enclosure from the same keeper. Now, this is a really cool enclosure. For one, live plants look awesome, and I like this climbing branch coming up through the middle, but I'm really interested in this thing on the left here. You have all these different cork rounds and half tubes here that have created kind of a shelf-like type network with different hiding spots. Like I was saying earlier, I'd love to add more hides for my crested gecko, and I guarantee that back here, that's where those crested geckos hang out, because they go back there. It's nice and shaded and dark and cool, and then they have this spot to climb up and climb, which is just going to be better for their muscle development. Obviously, climbing up an uneven surface that forces them to be upside down at sometimes is going to be a lot better for them than just climbing up flat glass. It's pretty easy for them to climb up glass, so this allows a little bit more dimension, so I really do like that. And again, I'm not totally sure what there is for lighting, but it looks like there's something up there, and yeah, I love this. And I believe this is another crested gecko enclosure. It's a different enclosure than last time, but very similar with this cork up the side here, cork up the other side, and horizontal branching as well through the top, which is another important thing. Many of us don't do a great job of providing enough horizontal branches, which is one allows the animals to be more relaxed on the top, and they like to climb, but to be flat and horizontal is also nice as well. So that's a nice horizontal branch. And this is a hognose enclosure. So this is a fantastic hognose enclosure. And actually, note this keeper doesn't have the hognose yet. She's set this up and she's allowing the plants in the enclosure to mature before introducing the hognose, which shows some patience. And also, that's something that we don't do enough in the hobby. You know, you see that in the fish tank world. Obviously, you want to cycle a plant and a tank and whatnot, but you don't see that a lot in the reptile hobby. So I love the fact that this keeper had enough patience to wait, set the enclosure up, let the plants begin to sort of take root, and then add the snake. So hognose will absolutely love this enclosure. Look at all this hiding spots, places for it to dig, and the leaf litter is going to be a place where the snake will have lots of enrichment and being able to dig underneath and hide underneath. So another great enclosure. Oh, and one other thing I'll say before I leave this photo is take a look at this wood structure here. This is opportunity for the snake to climb. Yes, hognoses will climb. They don't climb all the time. They're not going to spend the entire time up in this tree or up in this climbing branch, but he or she will climb maybe on a weekly basis. And this is a great way to enrich the environment. Talk to Lori Tarini. She talks about her hognose snake climbing all the time. And again, once the hognose is put into this enclosure, it's going to have lots of different opportunities for enrichment, which is just fantastic. All right, so this keeper has a ball python and a bearded dragon. And I think if I'm remembering conversations with this individual correctly, he really took to heart the message of increasing the level of your care for the animals that you have before you get another one. And I think just like all of us, he wants to have more animals, but has decided to keep his collection quite small at 2, a ball python and a bearded dragon, and then just do a great job at keeping those. And you'll see that he has definitely executed that plan. So this is a ball python enclosure. I can look at all these different hides and places for the animal to go, climbing opportunities and all these different live plants. Very, very deep substrate layer for the plant to burrow, or for the snake to burrow down in. Leaf litter. Very, very cool looking enclosure. There's the snake there hiding in one of his hides. And you can see his head poking out. I'm not totally sure what lighting is in this enclosure, but you can see there's another great picture of the snake basking. That is awesome. Yeah, there's definitely a halogen right here, I believe, and I'm not sure what the other lights are, but again, the snake is basking out during the day, which apparently ball pythons don't do. This one is breaking the rules, and he is doing that. And here's actually just a short video clip of the ball python enclosure. There he is, poking his head out of his hide. You can see him there. Love that enclosure. So much different enrichment, and it's just great. So next is the enclosure for this guy. We have a bearded dragon here. Again, very similar enclosure. Not similar as, a copycat, but you can see the same person set this up as far as, finding enrichment to be an important factor of their enclosures. So this is the bearded dragon enclosure, and I think this picture was taken during the sort of the sunset part of the day where it looks like, the UV and maybe some of the visible light has been turned off, but the halogen is still there. And there's this bearded dragon just passed out. He's not passed out, but he's just hanging out on the top of this log here, just relaxing. And tons of places for this dragon to climb and dig and move around and hide. And you can see that he looks pretty content right there. And I believe this is another video of the bearded dragon enclosure. So a couple live plants down there, some succulents, I think, and some nice substrate to dig through. And again, lots of opportunities to climb. Oh, and there's one final shot of the ball python climbing. Love these enclosures. Again, this is an individual that decided to put his time and effort into just 2 animals rather than expanding into more. I think if I'm remembering these conversations correctly, and even if that's not right, clearly this person has done that, and it's clearly paid off. And last but not least, these are enclosures from a keeper named Victoria. Now, she does have a YouTube channel, so I'll put that in the description below. She did send me some videos, and I want to show you a couple of them, but again, Facebook compresses them and sort of ruins the quality. So if you do want to see more videos of her animals, head to her channel, check it out. Now, this is a 4 foot tall by 4 foot wide enclosure for a carpet python. I believe there is a UV light up here, and it looks like a radiant heat panel as well. And I think she told me that she is also adding a halogen bulb at some point soon. And awesome climbing apparatus in the middle. Look at all these climbing branches, and there's tons of support. I guarantee you this snake spends a ton of time curled up at the top here because there's tons of support, and there's even a few shelves. So here is a photo of the snake, and you wouldn't even have to tell me that this snake is hanging out under a UV bulb. You can just tell by the way the scales are sort of reflecting the light. It has that iridescence. There's UV in this enclosure, and this snake is basking under it. I love carpet pythons. I love the way they can grip onto trees and they hang out in the trees. It's just, I love arboreal species, and obviously I own a carpet python as well, so I'm probably a little bit biased, but I do love that species. So this is a really interesting enclosure. This is actually an 8-foot long by 2.5 feet deep by 2.5 feet tall enclosure for a boa. You can see the boa here at the top. On the top left, that is probably some sort of albino. Maybe it's a call albino or a sharp albino. I'm not totally sure. And it is in a massive enclosure. I think this boa is only 1.5 or 2 years old. And it's an interesting story because this keeper told me that they bought this enclosure assuming that it would be a lifetime enclosure for the snake. And they realized after seeing how active she is or he is and it's moving around the enclosure that in the future they actually are planning to build an enclosure that's much larger, somewhere between 8 and 12 feet wide, 6 feet tall, 8 and 12 feet long, 6 feet tall, and 4 feet wide, which is a massive enclosure, and any boa would be happy to have that. So here, this is a great enclosure, lots of climbing opportunities. I'm not quite sure what there is for lighting. I think she said she's planning on adding UV and maybe halogen as well. And you can see in the background here, she said she actually wasn't happy with it. I think she painted it white from the black and then tried to cover it up using some coconut husk and wasn't totally happy with the way it turned out. But I actually think that looks pretty cool. It almost looks like moss is overgrowing something in the jungle, and it kind of looks like natural to me. So I think that is a fantastic enclosure. That is a massive enclosure for a small snake, and you can see as long as the setup is set up properly with lots of opportunity for enrichment and hides, the snakes will use it. And here's just a head-on shot of that same enclosure again. That is a pretty impressive enclosure. And here is a shot of the snake herself hanging out at the door. And as I said, Victoria sent me some pretty cool videos. And exactly like I said, there's the carpet python hanging out at the top of those branches there underneath the light. Looks awesome. And again, if you want to go see better quality videos on her channel, definitely go do that. I'll link her in the bio or the description below so you can see and stay up to date with what she is doing. And here is a video of her boa looking awesome perched up in the tree. Such a jaw-dropping enclosure. Anyway, thank you guys so much for A, watching the video, and B, if you sent me pictures and videos, thank you so much for letting me do this. I think this was a really cool idea to allow us to share what we are up to. I can only show you guys so much with my collection, but if I can continue to share what you guys are up to, I think that's the best way we can all move forward together. You guys can share ideas, even if you're someone that doesn't want to be on YouTube. Hopefully this is a way that we can all kind of contribute together. So in the comments, let me know what your favorite was. Let me know if you like this type of video and you want to see another one. If you do want to participate in the next one, definitely send me those photos like I already said. And if you're not subscribed to the channel and you don't want to miss another one of these videos or any other videos or podcasts, hit subscribe, hit like, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.